that those customers that remain with supply, that 23%, which is approximately 160,000 customers, are primarily in the Kingston and St. Andrew area. And I share with you that by the very nature that we had a Category 5 hurricane with sustained winds of 185 miles per hour, making a direct hit on our island, and we did not have an entire grid shutdown, is testament that we were doing a lot of things right in preparation, in investments, and also in response. One of the unique things we did here to save the grid is actually have plans to operate in 2 separate islands, whereby we ensured we had adequate generation to meet our customer demand in the west and in the eastern parts of the island, and ran several simulations around how we would operate in this non-normal, abnormal mode. That paid dividends, as so be it, the hurricane made catastrophic damage on the western side of the island, and the grid was actually islanded to prevent the eastern side of the island from coming down with the west. That right there says a lot in terms of the preparation and the execution. And I personally spent the night at our Energy Control Center with our operators as we rode through the storm. On the right, you're seeing what an accelerated restoration looks like. A restoration that includes significant redesign, rebuild, and relocating of our infrastructure. Here you're seeing that at day 90, we have here 94% of our customers now have supply. I have some good news since we last shared this presentation. As of this morning, we're actually at 95% of our customers who have power. That means that 33,000 of our near 700,000 customers are remaining without power. That right there is as a result of the dedication, the heightened partnerships, the strong execution, and the strong planning from our team, and many thanks to all the stakeholders involved. The key thing here also, as you look on this particular slide, as we talk about accelerated restoration, is if you go from the east going to the west, you see lots of white. That means that in the eastern and central part of the island, we have restored more than 99% of customers in those parishes. So the eastern and central part of the island is normalized. As you go towards the west, the 5 remaining parishes, that's where you're now seeing some blue. And of those parishes, I'm pleased to share that Hanover has 97% restoration, Trelawney, 98% restoration, St. James, where you see some blue, is at 92%, and St. James is unique because one of the things that we did in St. James is, given its importance to the economy, the tourism belt, and unlocking and stimulating that economic growth, and a special ask from the Prime Minister that by December 15th, he wanted critical areas along that tourism belt restored. We had prioritized that, and we delivered on that prior to December 15th. Moving now to the west, we see whereby Westmoreland and St. Elizabeth, they have some blue. And that's due to the catastrophic damage on the grid in those areas, and also the significant damage to many of the homes and businesses in that area that frankly also are not ready to receive power. So in Westmoreland, we are more than 60% restored in terms of the customers, and in St. Elizabeth, we are above 70% restored in terms of the customers at this stage in the restoration process. In the middle, you see whereby 1 month after, we had 80%. And now that we're at the 3-month mark, we have 94%. What you're seeing in terms of the slowing of the percentages there is the phenomena of the last mile that you'll hear more about, whereby you reach a point in the restoration where you're doing a lot more work to get a lot less customers back due to the catastrophic damage and also due to how sparsely populated some of these areas are. As I go to the next slide, here you're seeing Category 5 Hurricane Melissa and its impact on Jamaica, whereby, again, 23% of customers remain in service after the passing. That's 77% that lost power. Then you're also seeing whereby we are putting some more detailed description around what did the damage to both the transmission and distribution network look like. And I'll just speak a little bit in terms of the transmission network is the backbone of the system. And through the transmission network, you then supply power to the distribution network. The transmission, in order of reference, is our high voltage network, whereby we have voltages up to 138,000 volts. That's more than 1,000 times what you have in your homes typically, which is 120 volts. And then our distribution network, you have in the order of 24,000 volts. So what we're seeing is across the transmission and distribution, we have approximately 85,000 occurrences of damage, a significant portion of which are downed and damaged poles just due to the catastrophic nature and the sustained winds of Category 5 Hurricane Melissa. And I want to remind us here that our grid is designed for a Category 3 hurricane, and it faced a Category 5 hurricane. So with that, as we go through the presentation, you'll hear some things into what we're doing differently to, as best as possible, build back with resilience, and more to come as we go forward on that. You're seeing whereby we have in the order of 40,000 poles that were damaged, and over 1,400 miles of lines were also damaged.
Remember, you only have 1 minute per slide, Mr.
Yeah. Okay. Here we'll move along, and here you're just seeing one of our transmission lines. This is the high voltage line that I spoke about, and many of these lines go cross-country, very difficult terrain. Here you're seeing on the left what these 80-foot steel lattice towers look like on a blue sky day. To the right, you're seeing what it looks like due to the effects of Hurricane Melissa, whereby it's twisted and on the ground. That just shows the significance of the intensity of this hurricane and the damage to our infrastructure. Here you're seeing our distribution lines, and we have whereby 81% of our distribution lines were actually damaged, whereby 93 of the 115 were out of service. The good news today is we have all lines in service, but we do have sections of lines that are out of service, hence some of the outages that we have that are remaining. I want to go back here quickly on the transmission, because here you'll see whereby 58 of the 80 transmission lines were also damaged. That's 73%. This is a big difference than Hurricane Beryl, whereby Hurricane Beryl did not significantly impact the transmission infrastructure, but it did the distribution. So many times we have resources up in the mountains, up in the hills, over the terrain, working to get the transmission back so that we can supply the distribution.
What was the age of the transmission lines? Typically, these metal towers, I recall them from when I was a boy.
Yeah.
What was the typical age?
I would say in the order about 50 years, Blaine. Is that right? Average. And we do upgrades on these particular structures, whereby we do refurbishments, replace steel lattice structures and a few things to ensure the integrity. And many of these towers that were actually down, we actually had refurbished them so they were in good shape and not rusted and compromised. Here you're seeing our substations, which is the main source that the transmissions come into and then supply customers. And we had damage to, say, 3 of our 55 substations, which is good news. Not a lot of substations got damaged, and this is what it looks like in terms of those particular substations. One of the key ones I want to call out is the Magoti substation, as that substation received some damage, and the transmission lines going into that substation were also damaged. And that's a key substation that supplies St. Elizabeth. And it was not until January 15th that we were able to restore that critical transmission line that brought power into Magotty and unlocked the opportunities to restore more customers in St. Elizabeth. Here you're seeing some of our generation facilities throughout the system that received damage. On the left, you're seeing a cooling tower for the steam turbine at our Bogue plant, and that received some damage. By order of perspective, just so you know, that particular plant supplies about 40 megawatts. It's a combined cycle plant with a heat recovery steam generator, so it's one of our more efficient plants, and that 40 megawatts, by way of reference, is about 7% of the load we'll see at this time of the year. To the right, you're seeing whereby we have the 8 Rivers solar plant that suffered catastrophic damage. That plant has a capacity ratings of 40 megawatts, and because it's solar, you have a lower capacity factor because of the intermittency, which is about, like, say, 25%. So you typically would have an output of, say, 10 megawatt. But as you see there, that plant located in Paradise, catastrophic damage on that particular plant. I'll just touch on our operation facilities, and then I'll pass over to Blaine to speak more about preparedness. And here you're seeing whereby many of our very own facilities suffered significant destruction. You see in these pictures a before and after. And I'll just call out one in the interest of time. Look at our Black River location, whereby the only thing standing after Hurricane Melissa is the blue stanchion at the front. Everything else is gone in terms of the building. Now, what does that mean for us? That's a location whereby our people work out of. That's our major operational center. That's where we have many logistics and also storage. So we had to come up with creative ways in terms of temporary facilities, trailers to facilitate ongoing operations amidst all this. At this point, I'll now hand over to Blaine Jarrett, who's going to speak to hurricane preparedness. Thank you.
I just want to clarify the issue in terms of the question that was asked. So our transmission towers normally have a lifespan of about 70 years. And for those in particular got damaged, they were just about 50 years in terms of their age. So I just wanted to clarify that. So Hugh spoke to the issue of our preparedness and the fact that we only suffered 23% damage after or during Hurricane Melissa. It did not happen by chance. Our preparation was a big factor. What we did subsequent to Hurricane Beryl,
I think 23% were remained in service.
23% of our customers did not lose supply.
Right.
Thanks for the clarity.
77%.
23% of our customers remained in service. Thanks very much. You.
Yeah, good.
Right. So it did not happen by chance. Following Hurricane Beryl, we did a comprehensive review of our preparedness. Hugh, he came in just about at the tail end of Beryl, and he brought some world-class, first-class initiative to our preparedness. One of the things that we did was to enhance our interagency partnership. Right? We engage all our telecoms, water commissions, and we ensure that there was a joint plan in terms of our preparedness. We introduced a 24/7 fully staffed incident command structure. That, again, best in class, enable us to institute dedicated liaison to communicate with government of Jamaica, elected officials, ODPEM, municipalities, utilities, and critical customers. Approximately 1,400 employees of JPSCO, matter of fact, all employees of JPSCO were assigned storm roles, and they were also trained in those specific storm roles. We also mobilized approximately 70 line workers from North America prior to the hurricane making landfall. That was a game changer. What that facilitated, it facilitated our immediate response after Melissa, immediate. Before, we didn't have that. Also, our deliberate investment in terms of the T&D structures. We invested significantly there to ensure that we're prepared ahead of the storm. Vegetation was a challenge for us over many years. We instituted a revamped our entire vegetation management program. We engaged higher-tiered contractors with better equipment, and that was a significant part of our preparation leading into the storm. And you'd have seen, and our customers would have seen that right across the length and breadth of Jamaica. Our communication and digital infrastructure, again, another game changer. So we hardened our telecoms equipment associated with our supervisory control and data acquisition system. We call it SCADA. That provided great visibility for us to ride through the storm. It was a key factor in our ability to ensure that the grid was not a total shutdown. That also gave us significant visibility even after the storm in terms of doing our restoration. We instituted longer battery lives in terms of our telecoms systems. We moved from batteries that were 8 hours to 48 hours. Again, something that we have not done before. We deployed a new and improved digital assessment application to interface with our geographic information system-based tool. That enabled our ability to do faster, more accurate asset evaluation after. Damage assessment was almost like seamless with that tool. So again, big improvement. Resource and logistics mobilization. It's a key. Anybody who is familiar with restoration, if you don't have the capability to do excellent logistics and resource mobilization, you'd understand. We revamped our procurement and contracting process with overseas partners capable of ramping up material supplies. That again, game changer. We extend and contracted from our North American contracting firm to provide additional line workers. This was done prior to the start of the hurricane season with specialized vehicles and equipment. These teams allowed the pre-staging of resources within critical areas of the country ahead of the storm. We expanded our fleet of vehicles. Again, those was done very timely. Just before the start of the hurricane season, we started getting those vehicles, coming on the back end of having challenges getting vehicles from overseas. Our critical equipment and material were stocked ahead of the hurricane season. This impacted, was a very good in terms of the impact. It allowed us to have materials available to us right throughout the restoration. Hugh mentioned the damage on our generation. The generation is critical to our ability to deliver power. We did ensure that our generation mix was managed, and there are a lot of risks there. What we did in the first instance is that we expanded our black start capabilities. This is to ensure that our generating units, selected generating units, have the ability to start without receiving power from the grid. If you don't have the grid...
When you use these terms that are terms of art, like black start capabilities, you could maybe just explain to the average listener what that means.
Right. What black start means is that you have a generating unit, normally would require energy being supplied to it first for it to start, and that is normally from the grid. The black start means they can start in isolation of the grid. So that is a critical requirement for us to start up in areas where there's no electricity. So we actually put that in place, and that was also a success. We also conducted robust planning to mitigate the impact of the unavailability of renewables and LNG. So you would know that during a storm, most of our renewables would have been shut down and our LNG supply wasn't available. So those are critical things that we did that made a difference in our preparedness. Now, just to quickly walk through, I want to speak to our restoration strategy. Our restoration strategy, I can say, was best in class, all around centered with our incident command and a model that I'll share with you. Our model literally covers 3 main areas. 1, we initiate grid restoration ensuring safety, reliability, and stability of the grid. That is followed by damage assessment. I mentioned earlier black start capabilities, but to restore critical transmission lines to generating stations and substations. Hugh spoke about the backbone. If we did not have the capability to restore those lines, we would not be able to bring power from those black started generators to our substation, to our customers. We also, which is the second part of the model, we have a prioritization in terms of our restoration of critical facilities. What does that entail? Our hospitals, or airports, or clinics, or health centers, or National Water Commission pumps, or telecommunication facilities, or town centers, and major infrastructure. Those were our priority to stimulate back some sense of business, some sense of healthcare, etc., across the country. And the third area is we optimize resources to expedite customers' restoration. Again, the first out of business here is to ensure that we're able to restore large communities, and businesses, and homes. Then we also ensure that we had a 24/7 fully staffed incident command center that I spoke about earlier. And we also deployed additional field resources. As I said earlier, we were supported by some overseas line workers, and also all our staff had been given storm roles. I just want to move to the next slide. Thanks, you. I just want to move to the next slide, where what you're seeing there is a photos of 3 of our incident command. The one on my left is our central incident command that was implemented 3 days ahead of the storm hitting the country. That was necessary for us to align and monitor the storm to ensure that we have immediate response. And that was fully staffed 24/7. In the middle, you will see our regional incident command that we activated later in Montego Bay, again, primarily to facilitate one of the mandates that we got from the government to ensure that we can bring back that tourism belt early to facilitate economic restoration of Jamaica and that part of the country. That was installed in St. James. And the one to your far right, to my far right, you are seeing where our incident command that was established sometime later in Westmoreland. The objective there is that we wanted to ensure that we are positioned in the parishes or close to the parishes that were hardest hit, and we want to ensure significant coordination to accelerate the restoration in those areas. I move to this restoration update. Hugh just gave us out an overview, so I won't spend a lot of time on this in terms of 90 days. But just to pull out 2 that Hugh did not mention, you'll see on the bottom there, you see St. Elizabeth, where as of this morning, we were at 73% in terms of customers restored. Significant achievement. St. Elizabeth being one of the hardest hit parish. If you look to the far left, then you will also see Westmoreland. Westmoreland is now at 65% restoration. So we are very exactly. So if you look where you see that dark color area, that's literally the path that they are, and that is Manchester. So Manchester is.
Members, could you allow JPS to complete their
But the important thing about this slide that I'm happy that this was highlighted, the part that is in dark blue, that's the area where the storm actually walked. And it is the area with the most significant damage. Here we could just go to the other slide. Additional resources. Again, this is something that we are very proud about, because without these additional resources, we would not be able to expedite the restoration to where we are. I want to call out first that our Carlick partners, our Carlick Electric Utility Services, they assisted us in a significant way under an assistance program. 18 utilities from Carlick provided, from the Caribbean, provided assistance to.
Again, for clarification, is this some sort of association of utility companies,
right.
electric utility
So all
companies?
the utilities within the Caribbean forms an association that we call Carlick, Caribbean Electric Utility Services Corporation.
And JPS plays a leadership role there?
JPS
we do. I'm actually on the board of Carlick. So we have strong partnerships, and the program is a Caribbean Disaster Assistance Program that we play a part in, whereby we provide mutual aid to each other for these adverse weather events.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. That was a success for us as well. And these partners, today, they are still providing assistance in one shape or the other. We were afforded the opportunity to onboard 470 North American line workers with over 300 specialized vehicles and equipment. These are the bucket trucks, the diggers, rock diggers, and so forth that enable us to accelerate the restoration. And those photos there give a synopsis of the trucks on the ship, the trucks parked to be deployed. In terms of achievement, I'll go through this quickly. What's very important that we share these achievements. So approximately 3 months after the passage of Category 5 hurricane, the following important milestones have been achieved, despite the extreme engineering challenges and access constraints. All major hospitals have since been restored, with Black River being the last that was restored on Christmas Day, and I was personally there to see that happen. Restoration of critical NWC pumps, where I can say 95% of so far been restored. Restoration of the northwestern tourism belt as mandated by the government. That was done ahead of the December 15 target line. There are 3 areas that I want to highlight that normally the public wouldn't be aware of. You indicate the challenges on our transmission network. St. Elizabeth was left with no transmission line servicing that particular parish. In the initial stages, all customers that were restored in St. Elizabeth had to be supplied from Manchester or Spur Tree substation. There was a point in time that we could not add any more customers to Spur Tree. Fortunately, we were able to restore one of the major damaged transmission line, Magoti Spur Tree. That was about 2 weeks ago. That has enabled us to now accelerate the restoration in St. Elizabeth. Hugh spoke about earlier the separation of the grid in terms of island. That, again, is a big deal. It's a big deal in many ways. I'll share one. Without having the grid interconnected, the ability for us to safely and reliably restore customers would have been compromised. I'm happy to report that the grid is now operating as one grid. So all the islands that we had created, they are now back together operating at one grid. We still have at least 3 transmission lines that are out that are critical for some form of redundancy, and we'll be working on those thereafter. No, we did not grid enhancement, Hugh, thanks. We did not just restore. We looked for opportunities where we could enhance and harden the grid. That was important. It was important. Hugh outlined earlier that the grid is designed for a Category 3. And this is a grid that has been designed over multiple years. The normal philosophy around grid design is that you design the grid to the strength of the 50-year recurrence, the most catastrophic storm that occur once every 50 years. So there are elements of the grid that is designed for Category 2. There are elements of the grid that is designed for Category 3. Now, following Hurricane Beryl, we started looking at our design to increase that design capabilities. So what have we done specifically in our restoration? We use what we call an expanding foam technology as part of the setting of our poles. And as an example, we call it pole creep to increase the uprooting resiliency. What we have seen a significant amount of damage on our structures in many respects. We have seen poles broken at ground line. We have seen poles broken in the middle where they're supporting loads. We have seen poles broken at the top. We have seen poles uprooted. So this is just one of the things that we have done to increase their capability to withstand an uprooting event. We have also conducted selected rerouting of some circuits to more stable ground. Some of the poles that toppled just by virtue of the fact that they were in an area extended over weeks of rain. Soil gets soft, and they topple with the little breeze that came. So we made some adjustment there. We also redesign our circuits to enhance resilience against a domino effect failure. So where the opportunity presented itself, we were doing a complete rebuild. A redesign was done. We were putting additional stop structures that one failure does not then lead to a cascading failure effect. So that is something that we did, and we're very proud of that. Now, some of those failure mode that I indicate that we have seen in terms of broken poles and so forth, they were broken just by virtue of the sheer wind pressure that the Category 5 brought on to those poles. So what we did, we reduced our spans, and to reduce the loading on those poles will, in effect, improve their ability to withstand and load. Again, we had to do a cost versus speed of response balance, but based on what we did, I'm really proud of our engineers to come up with innovative solutions in addressing this problem. And the final thing I want to indicate that there are, or some of our critical transmission lines, the 3 lines that are out now, in particular, we're going to be looking to see what sort of hardening that we're going to be doing. Particular on the 69 kV, we will also utilize in other structures, for example, composite poles with higher strength to enable our backbone. And in the essence of time, we're going to just move on to the next area, the last mile effort. It is important that we share this information about the last mile effort. This last mile is the most difficult mile. These are what we call at the end of our circuits. These are challenging terrain. These are the more significantly damaged. And what we're seeing, the most of these are within the western parishes. St. James, Trelawney, Hanover, but more so in Westmoreland and St. Elizabeth. Now, this phase will take us a longer time, just based on the scale and the extent of damage. For example, each feeder span and structure must be rebuilt in isolation before it can be safely reconnected. In the last mile, there is a lot more work required to restore a lot less customers. Unlike the other areas where, as you restore, you get customers. This now you're doing a lot more work to get customers. Based on the societal impact, we have established a strategy where our restoration design is guided by the impact in terms of societal impact, not just the customer count. So what we do, we look to see how you can get quickly to the town centers, you can get to the clinics, you can get to those things that stimulate the community. Approximately 10 miles as an example, distribution lines were required to restore, for example, the Rowan River pump in Westmoreland. Now, from its source to where the pump is, we had to plant 340 poles in difficult terrain to achieve the restoration of that pump. And there were minimal customers, both in terms of the customers weren't ready to receive power and in terms of those who had the capacity to get power. Now, that again is what we are facing with in the last mile. It takes a longer time and a lot more work. This effort in Rowan River facilitated 30,000 residents in Westmoreland to be provided with water. So less customers, but the impact on the community was great. So I just wanted to make that point in terms of. And for me, I'll just do one more slide and ask Pierre to wrap up. So innovative solutions had to be employed to address these challenges, particularly in the western regions where we accelerated our designs to ensure that once we rebuild, we are rebuilding better and stronger. This type of innovative support also supports our local economy. Small communities, businesses such as corner shops, other service providers are returning to operations based on the approach that we took. This is how restoration translates into psychological recovery, economic activity, and community stability. Innovation solution implemented, as an example, we implemented what we call our mobile power generation initiative, where we first installed the first of its kind in Treasure Beach in December. That was a game changer. Just think about Treasure Beach, where the lives of the community would have been significantly impacted without some form of electricity. So that was installed, and it was a significant success. We also installed another in Darliston. They benefited from another unit that was commissioned earlier that provided supply from the Maud McLeod High School all the way back along that stretch to the tax office. And we continue to expand and bring on customers as we progress. We do, however, also have a plan to install another such unit in Betheltown, Westmoreland by early February. The point to note is that there are certain criteria that are required to facilitate this. We need to ensure that we do have some business community, some big district close by. We need to have houses within a particular density. The damage within that particular city or particular area is less than the damage to get the power from the source to them. So there are some criteria that is followed, and we are supported by an assessment with the regulator to guide us in this regard. Magati Island was also a success. Magati, as you know, is a generator. Supplied by water, by the river. We also utilize Magati to support some of the restoration in St. Elizabeth. So that was a success. So that's it for me, and I just ask Pierre to jump in at the...
I can't give you more than 3 to 5 more minutes to end your slide. I don't want you to take up all the time in presentation and not allow any for questions. So please, can we... things like stakeholder engagement, we've been seeing that through media, so you don't have to sweat it too heavily.
I agree. Good morning, everyone. My presentation, I guarantee you, may not be too long. I appreciate and I thank you for your feedback. So far, we have spoken about the restoration, the rebuild, and the efforts to get customers on. And so I just don't want us to ever forget the reality that we do still have customers who are without service. And so as a company, it's not just about communicating with you or stakeholders, various MPs, government officials, and municipalities, but also finding ways to support our customers while they are out. To this end, we have implemented energy hubs. We have actually had about 16 to date. As a matter of fact, today we are having 2 in Hanover, which really tries to address the psychosocial element that customers are feeling. So we will go into these hubs with dominoes, with music, with engagement to give persons ice. The reality is that these are some of the elements that really add to the frustration and in some instances, the depression of many of our customers. We also put in elements such as power banks and fans just to try and acknowledge the daily realities that they are now challenged with. We have really tried to take the lessons from Beryl to learn as it relates to who our stakeholders are and how important it is to keep them side by side with us. We continue to provide daily updates as it relates to the restoration. We would have started these initiatives by giving every single MP a liaison officer who keeps contact with them, so you have someone that you can speak to. But additionally, since this restoration, we have gone ahead to facilitate incident command orientations, restoration update meetings with councillors, joint tours for critical sites such as the Roaring River Pump, as well as communities such as Catherine's Hall with JCIF, as well as visits to the emergency power generation solutions, some of which Blaine spoke to already. Additionally, we don't forget our business customers and those industry boards as well. And to that end, we continue to meet with the Chamber of Commerce. So we would have met with the Black River Chamber of Commerce as well as the Westmoreland Chamber of Commerce, as well as varying industry groups. I think finally, if you could go to the next slide, my last slide. The real risk to our restoration that we really want to just take a moment to address is ensuring that it's sustainable from a community partnership and social perspective. Customer readiness is also a limiting factor to some customers getting electricity. We have seen the pictures, we have visited the communities, and when we speak of customer readiness, we, along with JCF, are doing independent surveys to see what this looks like. So far, we are seeing quite a large percentage of customers in some of the harder hit parishes missing potheads, having stanchion issues, or just infrastructure issues, roof gone, houses flooded, which will require rewiring and GER certification. These things are not cheap. And so we are in partnership with JCF and are working lockstep, not just to share the survey findings, but also to quickly identify and put into a criteria the communities that we will be putting in all our efforts to get them up in. So as we go across this restoration, we just heard about the last mile. We don't want to forget those customers who may be waiting a little bit longer, and we want to ensure that the resources to support them in their independent restoration of their households are targeted as well as expedited to ensure that this is done. And this includes, as I said, the wiring, repairs to households, etc. I think finally what I would really want to touch on is the risk that some of the non-technical barriers, I would say namely electricity theft, can pose to the safety of our customers or staff, but also the reliability of the grid. In one of our previous innovations, we would have restored some customers through our emergency mobile power generation facility. And in the night, everyone was happy. In the morning, it chip out, is the way we would say it. And this was the direct result of illegal attachments, or what we would call throw-ups, being placed on the lines. And so when this disruption happens, it's not just impacting one customer, it compromises the entire solution, and it also puts us in a position where we have to, in some instances, effect extensive repairs to get them back up. So to this end, the strong partnerships don't just end with the municipalities. It has to be ongoing with the various MPs and community leaders, so that when we do restore communities, as well as, in this case, constituencies, we do have the support to ensure that the resources are being matched to the customers, but also that we have that message around safety and a deterrence of theft. So that would be my abridged version, Chair.
Thank you.
I'll just wrap right now. Thanks. So in closing, I just want to say a tremendous thanks to our workforce, the men and women of JPS, our contractors, both local and overseas. I was out on Christmas Day, and I was in St. Elizabeth, and I met with one of our employees from Portland who had not been home for several weeks and who also had sustained some damage. So just testament to that resilience. And then, of course, to our customers, just a tremendous thank you for your patience, your understanding, and also your resilience in all that you do. That's not lost on us, and we very much appreciate it, and we're committed to working 24/7 until we get to every community, every customer, and have you safely restored. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it, and we'll open up to questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me start by acknowledging the very thorough presentation that you and your team have made here today. As an engineer myself, I appreciate some of the innovation and creativity that you have brought to it. And I hope you extend to all your team members, permanent as well as those who came in to help, the thanks of this committee for the work you've all been doing. The approach we normally take is that, as chairman, I exercise chairman's prerogative and open with 2 or 3 questions, and then I open the floor. I have Mr. Clark, Mr. Hines.
I was first.
Mr. Newell. Sorry?
I was first, and you turned my mic
You
on.
were first?
Yes, my mic is on.
Okay. No, you after the chairman. After
Yes.
the chairman, yes. Thank you. So Mr. Warmington, Mr. Clark, Mr. Hines, Mr. Newell, and then Mr. Dalrymple Filbert, Mrs. Dalrymple Filbert. Okay, so when we had the OUR appear before this committee sometime, I believe, in November or early December, they supplied us with they subsequently supplied us, we requested, and they subsequently supplied us with a chart of growth in sales in megawatt hours for the JPS. And what that chart revealed was that growth is actually slowing. If you looked at the first 5 years from 2015 to 2019, it was growing, I think, at about 2.5%, somewhere in that region, and it had slowed to below 1% in the last 5 years. That was going up to 2024. And when we looked at the 8 months, 2024 to 2025, bearing in mind that that period included the burial impact, there was really very little growth. It was flat. So the question is, what are the commercial implications for JPS of this slowing growth? And you know there's been migration of customers to solar, customers to LNG, etc. So what's the implications of this slowing growth, the increasing, the overheads being distributed against a smaller revenue base, and how that interfaces with the license and the regulations? So that's question one. The second, and the cost of power, of course. The second question is, you spoke of the communication with elected officials. And as someone whose constituency was very heavily affected, like 100% affected in the beginning, while we had communications, one of the challenges I faced and my colleague officials faced, Mr. Clark, beg you, one meeting at a time, was that we could not get any projections as to when restoration would. Everybody understood why we were out. But if we could have got some projections, it would have helped guide us and helped in our own planning as elected officials, and even in passing it on to communities, to business persons, to households, so they could know how to affect their own planning. So those are the two broad areas that I would ask you to start by responding to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the question. I will start off on the growth question, then my CFO, Vernon, will also add. So I think you're right on point in terms of the take on the growth being relatively flat or in the order of, say, 1 to 2%, particularly in recent years. And my thought process here is a big influencer and pathway to lower energy prices here in Jamaica has to be a growth strategy, as you said, because it's through that growth you're going to then distribute that additional sales over a wider base, and then the prices go down. So what are some thoughts in terms of what does growth opportunities look like here in Jamaica? One, I'll mention the data centers. We see whereby with the advent of AI that there are data centers throughout the world. And I think it's an opportunity for Jamaica to do more to attract data centers here, Jamaica and JPS. And we have already had some conversations with Flow and some other telecom providers. Just by order of magnitude, one data center can be in the order of, say, 30 megawatts. That's in the order of, with our peak demand of near 600 to 700 megawatts. You can see that's near like 5%. So that right there is an opportunity to have growth in a dense way that I think will serve us very well. The other opportunity is, what does it look like to have shore power? We see whereby due to carbon credits and the desire to be green, many of our cruise ships and other vessels that come from Europe and other places want to actually plug in to some green power when they get here on the island, as opposed to burning from the internal combustion engines on the ship that actually use some form of fossil fuel. So that's an opportunity. What does it look like to play in that space? I have my team exploring that, and we actually went to Miami and partnered and looked at what does that look like, as they do have some shore power there. The last thing I say about growth is an opportunity in terms of, if you think of share of the wallet in regards to energy, both in terms of, say, fuel prices and, say, electric consumption, what would it look like to electrify the transportation sector here in Jamaica? Frankly, when I was in New York, that's a big initiative, a big deal, and a big thing. And in terms of share of the wallet, the reality is the cost to charge is about 50% of what it would take to actual fuel and get the same range right now based on the EVs out there. So there's a lot more to be done.
That's on a per kilometer or per mile.
Correct, correct. So there's a lot more to be done in that space in terms of what can be done to stimulate electrification of the transportation sector. And if you think of someone in terms of their particular wallet, you have $100, and say of that $100, you're paying, say, $50 for your electricity bill and your fuel. You now have an opportunity by that share of the wallet to still spend less than that $50, but it's now going to the overall consumption, and you're getting that quality of service, and then that would actually push prices down, because we have an infrastructure that, through my lens, is about 70% optimized. What do I mean by that? Think of you having a 10-bedroom home that you have built, and you have only occupied 7 bedrooms. We can take on incrementally about 30% additional load customers without any significant build-out of our infrastructure. So that leads to great economies of scale. When I was in New York for over 25 years, where I served in the energy and power company there, where I was an executive for many years, it was totally different. That particular grid, if you're going to have electrification through the transportation sector, you are now building out billions of dollars of capital investment in order to meet that load. We here in Jamaica are in a very good position. We're on a hot summer day. I'm not doing water spray on my devices trying to cool them, because I have that headroom and capacity. So I think a growth strategy is really the way to go in terms of helping to manage some of those energy prices.
And there was an article that in Europe, EVs are actually overtaking internal combustion engines now for transportation. So it's consistent with what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
And the second question?
Yeah, so the second question in regards to the projections and the elected officials, I think we have made significant progress here, but I agree with you. We still have opportunity to do more in terms of earlier estimated times of restoration. And a critical component of that is damage assessment, whereby one thing we have done here is everything that we have committed to, we have delivered on. The thing is, what can we do to get more detailed damage assessment information earlier? Some things that we have deployed here is the use of drones to help in terms of damage assessment. Frankly, after a hurricane, many areas are impassable. You don't have access to some cases, therefore it makes it that much more challenging. But in some cases, we have opportunity to do better there, whereby one of the things that our takeaway from this is, how do we increase the resources allocated to damage assessment to have more timely damage assessment, and then through that, we'll be able to give better estimated times of restoration. And there, I'm thinking about partnering with some of these vocational training centers and other schools to bring those folks on board prior to the hurricane, train them on the application, train them on what it takes, some basic training, and then you have a wider pool that can do damage assessment, as that is critical path, that information in helping to do and establish estimated times of restoration.
So you'd be talking almost like a reserve force of technical people that can be drawn on to as a force multiplier, so to speak.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. You're right on.
All right, Mr. Warmington, I see you chomping at the bit.
Mr. Chairman. Turn off your mic. Mr. Chairman, was that someone or subpoena sent out to JPS prior to today's meeting?
No, I don't think there was some question because we had done it for a particular date and we had to move the date. The committee had authorized it, so on. But in any event, I was assured that JPS would be attending. But there was some question as to whether, because the summons was specific to the date, which was tomorrow, and the time. So there was some uncertainty about whether we would need to reissue that summons, but I'm thankful that it has not arisen because we were assured of JPS's attendance this morning.
Well, I must say that we appreciate the effort and the work of JPS in having electrical services restored to Jamaica. But at the same time, it doesn't mean they have a right to treat this parliament with contempt. I came in 1980 and came back in 2002, and I've never seen this parliament treated with contempt before. Never. And this is the reason why I'm pushing for the amendment of the standing order, that when any institution or anyone treats this parliament with contempt, there must be some penalty. If you do it to the Congress of the United States, there are serious penalties. And there's no less responsibility where we are concerned. And this should never happen again. Therefore, we have to take the necessary step to ensure that nobody treats us with this level of contempt again.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At least 4 questions that I have.
4, but what I'm going to ask members, with the time we are limited, and everyone has questions, so limit it to 2 questions. If we have time, we'll circle back.
All right. First and most important, the maintenance of the infrastructure that you have. You are the first party, meaning you own the poles, but yet you have third parties hanging onto them. Whose responsibility is to maintain those infrastructure and to see to it that the aesthetics is something that is accepted by society or by the country?
First question. Second question. Just ask both at the same time.
Second, the cutting of verges that affects your line. How often do you have an operation? And when you do have an operation, is it that you cut and you pay for cut and cart away, or you just pay for them to cut and pack it on the embankment?
JPS?
Thanks for your question. So let's go to the first one. So JPS could enter into a contract with those other utilities for an attachment. It is our responsibility to maintain the structural integrity of our structures. We do have requirements for those third-party attachers to meet a particular standard in their installation. Whenever they do violate, there is a process where we engage them to get them to fall in line. In recent years, we had recognized that that needs to be strengthened, and we have since been working with those attachers with some new regulation and also new requirement in our contracting to get that done. So we'll acknowledge that, yes, we have seen some of those and we are taking steps to address it. So that's my response to your first.
I don't think the question was just about structural integrity. It's about aesthetics.
Right.
Because some of it really looks like hell in the community.
St. James. You would not want to see what St. James looks like with all of those cables, underground cables hanging from the JPS would have put in new poles, but they would cut the old poles. It is hanging down, it's on walls. It's just not in keeping with the aesthetics of the place. And I'm asking through you, sir, what is it? Because I heard Mr. Blaine saying that, yes, they are in the process. How long is the process is going to take? We are one of the town center that takes in the cruise ship and also has one of the major airports. People coming and going.
Yeah. Vernon, want to expand on that one?
Go ahead, Ron.
Go ahead,
Good morning,
Vernon.
Chair, and thank you, Member, for your observation. And we have recently, as Blaine explained, we have entered and drafted new pole attachment agreements with and a format which require certain responsibilities in terms of attachment points that include underscores your core concern around aesthetics. We do have some legacy systems attached to our network where we're working with a particular provider as they moved off those systems to allow newer systems to be there, and as they churn some of those customers off, we were giving them time, but we are very concerned in terms of aesthetics, and of course, we have standards in terms of the minimal attachment points, what must be there, and that has now been properly contracted. You should also note that not all the poles that you might see belong to JPS. You have telecommunications companies who have their own attachments, their own poles that they have in between our poles. But at the attachment point, that is governed. At the attachment point, it is governed now under contract. But it does not preclude any municipality by setting standards that how things might look apart from the attachment point.
All right, we have to move quickly with the responses as well.
Right.
Go ahead.
For the second question regarding vegetation, so we did indicate that we have revamped our vegetation management program. We have now institute contracting firms where they have the capability, significant improved capability over what we had before. Their contracts specifically require them to cater cuttings to the dump, unless on private property where the property owner asks for the content. So you would have seen significant improvement over the last year in particular. If you are not seeing that, I would be happy for you to share that detail with me offline that I can address it. So I'll talk to you for the specific. But that's
Mr.
one
Hines?
thing that we have seen significant improvement across the grid.
Mr. Hines?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good morning again, JPS. Thanks for your work so far. Two questions. I want to know, on the back of, post-hurricane, persons have received bills during the period when they didn't have any power, any service. I want to know, how does your billing system work, and especially how does the rebate system work for JPS? One. And the second question is, are you aware that JPS workmen, whether they are directly contracted or permanent workers of you, request money for restoration of service during the recovery period? Thanks.
No, thank you for your question. I'll answer the second question. I'll have Pia and Vernon take the first. When you say that workmen request to be paid, that hurts my heart, that during these unprecedented times of hardship, we have that going on. And what I will share with you is, just recently, we made an arrest. This is something that we have zero tolerance for. And all I ask is, give me a lead to who this person is, and I guarantee you we'll have our security forces out there, and we will ensure that we do right by the law. It's very unfortunate. We hear of it happening. We have done several things to communicate to customers that it's a zero tolerance, that it's not right. We have done tone criers. We have done texts. We have also sent out our security forces, frankly, in many operations. And the good news is, just recently, this particular week, we made an arrest. And we'll be out there only amplifying the efforts around that, because it's very unfortunate and it's disheartening that that is happening. With that being said, I'll hand over to Pia and Vernon.
A clarification, the arrest was of a JPS employee or a contractor?
This was not an actual JPS employee to my mind. It was an outside person who was doing this.
A scammer?
Scammer.
All right. Good morning again, everyone. So I would want to start by just acknowledging the question, which is, are we aware if customers are being billed for periods, entire periods that they are without electricity? It is not JPS's intention. We have been in consistent communication with the OUR as it relates to going to ensure that customers, for the period of their bill cycle, that they do not have energy, that they are not billed for this energy. I want to give a little bit of clarification based on some of the complaints that we have received through customer experience that may be I guess, resembling some of the experiences that some persons may have. Prior to bills being issued, we would have communicated to customers varying scenarios. However, the one that specifically speaks to this is issuing a zero consumption bill. And so what that bill will show is, save and except there's a balance brought forward from the previous period, there should be no consumption charges or no customer charges on that bill. The other thing that we would have seen...
Excuse me, isn't there some customers have a demand charge?
These would be commercial.
Would they also not bill at all during this time if they
for
had
the
no?
zero consumption?
They would be zero, yeah.
Yeah. But I want to give a little bit more context, right? Because what we have seen, especially over the last month, is an increase of customers who have this very complaint. And when we do the investigation, and again, from the emails that we have shared, we have put the information there that customers can reach out directly to us, and we will take every single case on a case-by-case basis and then assess. But from what we have seen is a scenario where either A, customers did use the services and had supply prior to Melissa, and then that's been brought forward, or more frequently now B, where customers did have supply for a period of the restoration. They weren't fully restored. However, due to, which Blaine had touched on a little bit earlier, an inability for our systems to communicate with the meter at the time of the bill cycle, we would not have been able to pick up that reading. After the customer is restored or the communication network has been restored, we are now able to pick up the full reading that the customer may have had. So let me use an example. Let us say that a customer's billing period is between the 1st and the end of October. Let us say that the customer was actually restored maybe the 10th of October. However, at the time of the billing period, at the end of the month, when we tried to ping that meter, we were unable to get any reading. Now coming to the end of November, what the customer will have is the November consumption plus the period for October that they would have received electricity, but we wouldn't have been able to bill them. So they may have gotten a zero consumption bill for the October bill period, and then a true-up or the brought forward amount when we are able to do the communication. But that said, we understand that every single customer's situation is indeed different sometimes, and so to that end we implore all of our customers that where they see some kind of anomaly or should they have any query or require explanation or even time to pay the bill, they reach out to us directly. We do look at it on a case-by-case basis.
You rely on the telecoms to communicate with the meters?
Yes, because over 98% of our meters are smart meters.
Okay. Miss?
Thanks. That was one side of it. I had asked about the rebate system.
So it would follow that if it is that we have received the customer's complaint and we have done the investigation where it is that a customer has been estimated and then we get an actual bill, the provisions do allow for us to adjust, and that will be what happens. Sometimes the actual consumption is lower than the estimated bill, in which case the next bill will automatically reflect that. Sometimes the actual consumption is higher than the estimated bill, and again the next bill will reflect that. So those adjustments are in place once it is that it is raised to us.
Mr. Newell?
Thank you, Chairman. I've been so eager to have JPS, it's difficult to ask only 2 questions, but
Let's start
I will
with 2.
adhere.
If we have time, we'll come back.
In terms of the hardening of the grid, not much was said on that in the presentation. And I know there's a whole discussion going on nationally about going subsurface with aspects of the grid. I want to square that with the current court matter with Hope Pastures, where they're in court with the JPS regarding the section of their grid that was built underground. I want to know what JPS, what your clear position is in terms of how we harden going forward. And I also want to know, just on that same question, what level earthquakes, you mentioned the grid was built for a category 3 hurricane. What level earthquake is the current grid built for? And where are you going in terms of the restoration? That's one question.
With a number of parts.
Right, so the second question. So there are a number of communities, and I don't want to go parochial, but in parts of St. Mary, for example, where electricity was restored, but because of perhaps some vulnerabilities, a number of streetlights are out. I can speak to the town of Highgate, for example. And I'm wondering whether JPS would be open to having a more lenient process for persons to put in solar lights in those spaces where it takes a long time for you to respond because your team is focused on the West in terms of restoration.
Just for clarity, you're talking about private sector initiatives to put up public or street lights on JPS poles?
So currently, what I'm told now is that it would be considered trespassing in terms of putting up anything on a JPS pole. So whether it is private, whether it is a community association, whether it is a member of parliament, a council, I don't want a free-for-all, but some localized and easier system so that in the interim we can have light in those areas.
No, thank you for your question. I'll speak to the hardening and the undergrounding. I think that the good news is I operated in New York, where we have the largest underground infrastructure in the world, with Conadis in New York, where I was for over 25 years. So I understand underground system, what it takes to build them, operate them, and maintain them. The reality is underground systems cost north of 15 times an overhead system. So right now, I would say in Jamaica, to say we're going to underground the entire electrical infrastructure, I would say is cost prohibitive. What I do recommend, and that we're looking to do more of, is what we call selective undergrounding, whereby you can identify some critical facilities, some key areas, whereby you say, what does it look like to underground that? For example, what does it look like to underground a supply to some of our critical hospitals? What does it look like to underground the Elegant Corridor or the tourism belt in St. James? What does it look to underground any other critical area or facilities that we identify? So that is something that we continue to explore, and that frankly we have got some initial pricing on, and it's extremely, extremely expensive. But we continue to pursue that, and I think selective undergrounding is an opportunity here.
Just in terms of the expense, I know there was an indication that JPS had said it would take about $450 million thereabout to restore the grid. Was this to get it back to the category 3 level, or was it to get it to where you see it with the Elegant Corridor and other parts being underground? That's one. And second, have you been able to raise that funds to deal with the restoration in the way that you had in mind?
Okay.
Hold on. I think if you're going to, okay, but if we're going to end up on that, I think on that issue about raising the funds for the restoration, there were a number of questions we had in their absence, and probably we should just take that as a set, because I know other persons have questions about the funding and the future and so on, particulars of the loan. So if we're going to, if anybody else has questions on that, I would just ask them to piggyback on it now, so that he can, the president can just answer it at one time.
So before going to my
No, Mr. Newell, you're abusing the privilege I gave you. Ms. Burchell?
Yes, I think this can piggyback on the,
I'm
I think this, hearing me?
yes.
Yeah.
Whoever is not speaking, you could turn off your mic, so a little more. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this can piggyback on that question. My question and the question I get from constituents is who ultimately pays for this investment? How much of this cost will be absorbed by JPS versus what do you intend to recover from extra tariffs from the customers who usually bear the brunt of these kinds of investments and expenses? Who pays? Will it be the customers? And how much should they be bracing for?
So, Mr. Grant, just before you respond, there was some uncertainty when we were dealing with this matter. First of all, what was the size of the loan? Because the figure had been all over the place. So if you could just give us what was the final loan that you received? What are the terms? Was there an origination fee? And how that impacts your capacity to complete the restoration?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll just finish up on the second part of your question in terms of the overall cost and what are we restoring to. We're restoring primarily to like in kind, but build in some elements of resilience like having the polecrete, the expanding foam, and then in some areas, particularly along the transmission corridors, we're looking to use composite poles instead of wooden poles that can elevate the rating closer to, say, a category 5. But that's really selective. But for the greater part of the restoration, in the interest of time, you're sort of restoring with like in kind, because frankly, to build in these resilient components, there are long lead times on these materials, north of 6 months to a year on many of them. So it's on a go-forward basis that we look to have that in our plan. And frankly, we have already integrated that in our overall profile, whereby our resiliency component in terms of how we operate the business. So that takes care of that. As in terms of the loan and the numbers, I'll speak to that a bit, and then I'll have Vernon, my CFO, chimed in. So the revised and the latest estimate that we have on the restoration cost is in the order of $300 million. So that has been reduced. That $300 million.
The original estimate was 450. Was that? You said it has been reduced to 300. What was the original estimate?
I mean, we had it in the order of, say...
I know there were various estimates.
Yeah. So I would just, I think right now, I know where we're at 300,
okay,
based on where we're at and the progress we're making. So I think that's the key number. And as we think about that 300 million, the funding for that comes from several sources. It comes from, one, in regards to the emergency disaster fund that we have. That's in the order of 40-something million. Vernon will correct me. We also have the loan in the order of 150 million. We have cash from operations, and we also have contributions from our shareholders also in terms of investments into the system. Now, we are currently at 95% restoration. On a go-forward basis, we have restored the majority of, say, some of the critical facilities from, say, a transmission perspective that's required to get customers back. On the distribution system, we still have some build-outs in some of these areas in the West that we have catastrophic damage. So while we look to continue with the funding, I think it's important to note that a portion of that $300 million, just north of, say, over $200 million, we will fund from cash from operations, but that's in building back the redundancy in our transmission system to have reliable and stable supply, and it's not a critical path to, say, having customers restored. So I just wanted to clarify and share that. Vernon, I'll just have you touch on more.
No. with respect, I don't think it's clear. You said you wanted to clarify, but you estimated 300 million.
All right.
150 plus 40-something million, 150 from the government, 40-something million from the emergency disaster fund.
Right.
That carries us to near 200 million.
Right.
You did not specify cash from operations or cash from shareholders, but then you refer to a bit over 210 million or something like that. What I'm trying to, what I think committee is trying to get to, what's the deficit?
Right.
What's left to get you to this 300 million? Maybe.
Yeah, I'll have Vernon go ahead and take that. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. So, as you outlined, so in terms of uses of funds, we have approximately, around 340 million in terms of outflows relating to Melissa. 300 in core infrastructure spend and about an incremental 40 million in working capital. What are the unappreciated elements? That part of the response and support we provide is that we have deferred payments of bills to customers, which you have to fund. And we subsidize some of that during this time as part of the efforts to help customers get on their feet. And that's around $40 million in terms of that element. In terms of sources, 150 from the loan. The interest rate on that loan is 5.5%. It's a 5-year tenure. Those are the key terms. There's no fees.
No other fees related.
No fees. All right. An interest paid biannually starting 2026, a 1-year moratorium. In terms of other sources of funding, the EDF around 42 million, the other short-term loans from commercial lenders about 15 million, and the rest, the lion's share of that, over 125 million or thereabout, is from our cash from operations and our investments are made from unregulated businesses, as in funds paid from our shareholders into JPS to help support our cash at this time.
Okay, so when you say the 40 million to support working capital, for example, could you just give the committee members a sense? JPS's revenue is X. A percentage of that basically flows straight through to the power generating companies.
Absolutely.
A percentage of that goes to the Ministry of Finance as GCT. Yeah. So we don't have a good sense of what is left to run the distribution or the transmission and distribution network and all the other commercial and administrative operations monthly, so that would that 40 million represent 1 month's working capital, an additional month's working capital, 6 weeks? Or would that, I'm just trying to get a sense of that.
Yeah, so that 40 million would be a additional working capital that we would have had to deploy as a result of lower collections, both deliberately, meaning we offer support to our customers and we anticipated. So for example, if we are billed, to your example, Chair, $10 for the power that was sold to us by independent power producer, we know out of a combination of A, we would have actually reduced that cost in December to 80, so that's $20. And we also knew that given the general economic condition of our customers, to expect that not everyone will pay on time in full, and we also would have extended that, okay, we will not be disconnecting you. So we would have suffered an additional 20 million or $20, this example. Hence, you have $40 short to pay that $10 that you owed that IPP. So that means that that's cash that we were out of pocket.
Thank you. But just coming back to my example, if JPS, I'm not up to date on what JPS billing is, but let's say it's $1 billion US dollars, or you can correct me what exact figure is. But what portion of that billion, including GCT, so some would go, GCT would go to the government, and a percentage would go to the private power generators. In a sense, almost a pass-through. You do the billing and collection, but you are collecting on behalf of government and behalf of the private power generators. I'm just trying to get what percentage would you be left within your hand?
Approximately 70% or thereabouts of our pass-through costs.
Are pass-through.
Yeah.
So you really have to run JPS on 30%
Correct.
of what you build. When I say JPS, I'm talking about the transmission and distribution system and all the support.
To include even our power facilities ourselves.
And the one that
We
power
own.
facilities that you still own. Which would not be the base anymore, but would be the sort of peaking facilities
Well, a combination of our Bogue plant is
Bogue plant is still in the base
Is
load.
still in the base.
Okay. Follow up. Well, before you follow up, I have to give Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert if it's on the same thing.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I want to just start by endorsing what you said at the start, that the restoration strategy, inclusive of the additional services that was brought in Jamaica, was excellent. I really want to congratulate the company, and I do so against the background now that even I heard in the news where our first world countries, right over there in the United States, having snowstorms, and they are without electricity. I mean, I've spoken to people, so, I mean, they have had a hard winter. We have had, for the first time ever, a Category 5 hurricane. So regardless of what has happened, and I acknowledge everything, I think that the Jamaica Public Service Company ought to be congratulated, and you said so. I want to endorse that. I also want to endorse the presentations and indeed the answers that have come to us this morning at this committee, because they have been clear, and I know our chairman is particular, and when he's not answer, you know that the answers have been particularly good this morning. So I want to congratulate the team that is before us, and I want to say a personal thanks, because for the very first time, I'm putting faces to names that I have never met. And my thanks is personal, and I'm saying it on behalf of the constituency that I represent, because we don't have, Mr. Jarrett, large communities, large businesses, large homes. But I want to say JPS, through people like Blaine Jarrett, Sam Davis, I'm seeing them for the first time. I wrote their names down. I don't see Mr. Bullock. That's another name I know, that have responded to very deeply rural communities. Mine is one of the most deeply. You know a lot about it, Chairman. You have been keenly watching it. And we are deeply rural, and we are below the radar in terms of large businesses. But we have had good responses from the JPS, and I want to say a public thank you to them, and also the fact that we have most of our communities now that have, yes, and so I really want to say thank. What is very important to me, and I want to say it, I was particularly impressed, you spoke about your training of your people, a sub-team, so that can respond. Now, I hope this is not just talk, because in South Carolina, we have 2 heart schools, training facilities. And because we are deeply rural, and we are not in the tourism belt, there is space, there is the opportunity. And I really would like to engage the JPS in terms of, and we have a large cadre of young people who are bright, need to be channeled into these resources, and it certainly would help our communities in that way. And in so doing, it would also help to engage our young people, those of us who have not reached a stage where, what you said, throw up lines, to discourage the throwing up of lines if you have the community. So I really want to thank you all for an excellent job. Well done, your presentations, and to say that I'm available, you can get back. I really think the idea of training these people in the areas is something that is excellent.
As a sort of auxiliary
Yes,
force.
yes. Yeah. And you see, it helps, because if you have trainees there, they can help to respond. I also want to commend Karen Brown, your manager, who deals with Trelawney. She's excellent. And to say at this point, while we criticize JPS, no, Chairman, they lost one of their workers through electrocution in South Trelawney yesterday. He was on the pole restoring light in an area near to Albertown, and something happened and the current, and he's no more. So while I thank you, I want, on behalf of all of us, to extend our sympathies, because you know we're quick to complain when things don't go right. But these are people who are Jamaicans with families, and they're on the poles trying to restore, and they don't know, the current just connected, and that was the end of his life. So I want to do so, and as I say, to thank you very much, and to ask you to engage us with this auxiliary thing. And we have 2 schools we are already waiting. It will help us because there are areas where people are throwing up lines, and it causes problems for those who are paying customers. So if we have that training facility and we bring a certain amount of awareness, I think it would help us all very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
And I would add the Newport Heart Training Facility in South Manchester. That Mr. Phillips, you've been waiting patiently. Yeah, but you wanted to respond to.
One quick thing, and thanks for all the kind words, I appreciate it. Just in terms of, by order of fact and correction, we're saddened and condolences by the passing of that person yesterday. It was not a JPS employee, it was an employee of an independent contractor who was doing work for JPS. And what we know now is that particular employee fell off a ladder. So it was not an electrocution, as we know. The person fell off of a ladder. We take safety very seriously. It is our North Star in terms of our employees and contractors, and we'll do the due diligence to do everything we can to prevent such occurrence. But thanks for your words.
Well, thank you very much. Make it be known in the public sphere, because
Okay.
that is what came
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Phillips?
Thank you, Chairman.
And I would say we only have
Yeah,
2 minutes.
a few minutes.
So,
I mean, we can't say it enough because I'm sure that majority of your workers were impacted, and their families were impacted by the hurricane, and they were out there.
and we've
immediately
congratulated
after.
a few times,
Yeah.
so we can move into the question.
But you know, when you mention percentages, I mean, especially for us deep rural MPs, it really matters not much, because when you say 70% or 90% of Manchester is, Mandeville town alone is 3/4 of Manchester. And when you have deep rural communities like mine, and I'm looking at your map where you have Manchester ticked off, and I intervened when you had the map up on the screen, that there are still sections of Manchester which is not, which has no power. And I mean, I reported communities like Comforthall just got yesterday, and your team is in Evergreen and other areas working now. But coming back to communication with MPs, with JPS itself, normally, if it's outside of the hurricane or a storm or something like that, then we might get communication. It may be on paper of what should work, but it doesn't actually work that way. Because prior to the hurricane, as Member of Parliament, I got contacted by WhatsApp from somebody from the Mandeville office, but then trying to communicate with them post was redundant.
They were actually from the regional office. They were actually from the
regional office, yeah. Wherever it was, you know.
Yeah, it was frustrating. It
became
was
redundant because you're reporting, we are the first point of contact for constituents. And when we had the Ministry of Energy here, there has to be a mechanism where the communication, be it with the MPs, the councillors, that something is set up permanent. Because when we go on the ground in the constituencies, when we see street lights gone, the mechanism just even to report is very onerous. So if something in that matter can be dealt with.
And oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Could you just get to the...
And the second is the overhanging, as was brought up by the member from Central St. James. The lessons from Beryl, and you mentioned it, the lessons learned from Beryl that was or tried to be put in place before Melissa. But what are the lessons that we're going to be learning from Melissa now that we will be putting in place, seeing the change of weather patterns and everything? And sometimes because we have not had hurricanes as often before the Beryl, we tend to take our time to put them in place.
We're under pressure time-wise, so I have to cut you off here. I apologize.
Because my question could just be tacked on to his first question, which is when we put the picture of 94% of the island having been recovered, it really masks great geographic disparities for deep rural constituencies like, well, you know where the gray area is on this map that you have. The two questions I have, is this reflective of the lack of investment in the infrastructure in these areas, first of all? And the second question is, what can we tell them? Can you give us a constituency kind of breakdown and plan, timeline, when you're going to go where, so we can feed that back to our constituents? And finally, the off-roads. So the main roads are getting a lot of attention, but I realize that you have a great lag with the sweeper team that's supposed to come behind to ensure that the off-roads are also connected. Do you also have a timeline for that? And how can we get in touch with someone to get ready information to constituents to let them know when their off-roads will be connected? Thank you.
So what I would just say in terms of that continuing communication channel with the elected representatives, because we try not to be too parochial at the committee level, but we all have a parochial interest in knowing what will happen in our constituency. So you can't address every constituency now, but if you can leave us with a channel that can address that.
Kenny, I would just say a few things. We hear you, and I think we have some opportunities there. One thing, as I look behind you, I see MP Andrew Morris. And one of the things we did with the MP Andrew Morris is we brought him into our incident command located in Westmoreland. And there we engaged him one-on-one around his constituent and all the areas in his constituent. And not only do we provide timelines, but more importantly, we get the input of the MP in terms of what are some economic centers, what are some things that would stimulate your particular region, and have that inform our restoration strategy. So that's what we want to do more of in terms of getting your input in to help establish the priorities in terms of restoration in your area. So my commitment to you is that we will engage you on a one-on-one basis to see exactly what your needs are. And then very importantly, it's not just about me telling you a timeline, but you sharing with me through your lens what's a priority in your constituency, your community, and have that inform our strategy in terms of how we go forward. So we will do that and we'll engage further. But thank you very much for that.
Any final comments, Mr. Grant, before we wrap up?
I will just say thank you so much for your time. Thanks for the engagement. Thanks for your questions. I have committed that at the center of my leadership will be heightened stakeholder engagement. My commitment to you is that we'll continue to build on that, as particularly during these unprecedented times, the only way we're going to overcome as a nation is through these heightened stakeholder engagement. So thank you very much. Be safe and be well.
All right. We've had, I think, a very useful morning. Thanks again to the JPS team for coming. I have just asked the committee clerk to go and check if the CDF are ready, because if they are, then I will have to apologize. Yes, they are ready? You're speaking. Oh, you are the chair of that committee? Well, then I will have to apologize to the NWC team. But I noticed that during the JPS presentation, they were giving updates. Well, if you give me the permission to allow them a 3 to 5 minute statement, then please, NWC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and actually good afternoon to members. So I took copious notes whilst my JPS colleagues were actually doing their presentation, and certainly in terms of our systems which are out. Most of our major systems are back on track. That's a given in the western part of the island. After the hurricane, New Master Bray, Great River, Rowan River recently, which our major facilities were out. We're still having some challenges in some of the areas. St. Elizabeth, they spoke about St. Elizabeth, the impact the hurricane would have had on their transmission. So we still have a number of stations in that part of the island still operating based on generator power. The good thing about it, though, Mr. Chairman, is that JPS and ourselves, since Melissa, we had an excellent relationship before, but I think the relationship has grown even better since the hurricane. The challenge, though, is that I think one of the MPs made mention recently about being deep rural. 93% of our customers are basically restored with supply. However, the next 7% is basically dispersed in rural districts. And I'm very encouraged based on the comments and the remark that was made by the President and his team. So what we'd have done our preliminary checks on most of these, if not all these facilities. So once JPS restore service, we will ensure that our customers are served. I know I have only 3 minutes, so we'd have to augment service, for example, in a community like yours, member, in South St. James, with the acquisition of the water trucks that we have recently. It really enhanced, but we know that we still have some way to go. What I have done, we had a operational meeting last week, and I have tasked the regional managers to have a meeting, have a discussion with you and the other elected officials, so that we can look at some of the areas that where we do with trucking that we basically have not yet been able to truck. So we'll be having that individual discussion. And finally, my last comment, Member Clark, I know that you have a challenge with Portobello. Chairman, Portobello is one of the stations that was totally inundated after the hurricane. So we have basically done the preliminary work. We basically should be completed by Friday. Then we will liaise with our JPS counterpart. And following that, so I am giving a reasonable estimate within the next week and a half. That system member will be restored fully.
Yes, I'm going to. No, because you people are on the CDF committee. So if you want to ask and delay your committee, I don't mind. But
your mic is not on. I'm just begging, Chairman. Mr. Fagan knows my name and knows. I'm not talking about Hurricane Melissa now. Mr. Fagan, Kinloss has not had water for 4 years. And it's something that something has been stopped here. Do I'm begging you. I could never
Clark,
leave here and not
want
say
to
engage me, please.
Mr. Fagan, I don't want us to get into everybody now starting to ask you about our parochial interests, as important as they are. But just the 7% or so that you mentioned that have not yet been connected. As a former chairman of the Water Commission myself, I have a sense of how remote some of these sources are. And I think JPS will have have a difficult time in the short term restoring all those. Why don't we look at trying some independent, some solar-driven pumps, for example, in some of those facilities? Because they're really so remote that it is not commercially feasible to really, for the JPS to try and, if they had to go and run like the Roaring River plant, justified 340 poles. But a smaller facility really can't justify rerunning a whole line. So can't we look at alternatives, renewables or so on for some of these more remote sources that may not supply, vast populations, but are important to the local communities, but not be totally dependent on the JPS grid? Okay, we just ask you all the questions one time.
No, just a point of clarification from you, Chairman. I know through no fault of the committee, we have an abbreviated meeting today. But I think there are some issues that the sitting shouldn't just be detained by time, but by the issue. And so I'm wondering if it is possible for us to have NWC come in at a time when we can have a full conversation, because this is also the final meeting of the CDF committee for the fiscal year. And I know from my constituents and a number of others, there are projects to deal with. So I'm wondering, Chairman, if instead of having us ask half a question each, if we can have them come back and we deal with it then.
Okay. All right. So you're suggesting that at the next meeting, we invite the NWC and we take them first at that meeting to try and compensate for their patience today. So do we have to ask the half questions now? All right, go on with that.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. The trucking of water, is there a schedule for when we can get some water trucked? I know that before the hurricane, you had put in a plan for how you'd get into some constituencies and parishes with some big, audacious plans. Are those still in train? I know you've experienced extra damage since Hurricane Melissa, but Cambridge and St. James and Westmoreland and all of those parishes that have been affected, do you now have a recovery plan for them that includes emergency trucking of water? No.
All right, that's it. That's the final. So just respond, please, Mr. Fagan.
But there is actually a schedule, but it's a challenge. And based on the geography of these areas, it's very, very difficult for us to traverse. And that's why, as I had said earlier, I have mandated the regional team to have a sit-down, a discussion with your team for us to kind of look at our schedule to see the different sections that we basically are not touching. Because sometimes what we find is that based on where the trucks can go, one person might be getting it 3 or 4 different times than other persons. So we're looking at some other innovative ways and means. It might basically mean putting out a 1,000-gallon tanks at designated points or locations where those can be, where those customers can get access to the service. But we can have the further discussion when we meet with the local team.
Mr. Fagan, I'm sure everybody wants your number before you leave so that they can continue this discussion. But you didn't respond, which I think relates to JPS as well, where I said it may not be commercially viable for them to prioritize the most remote. What about alternate sources of power for those sources, the pumping from those sources?
Yes, Chair. It has been explored, particularly for the newer systems that are coming on stream, which are normally executed through rural water. But we have about I think it's about 2 facilities now that we have basically tried that kind of approach, and basically it has worked. And you rightfully have indicated, because, for example, a system in members' constituency, Vaughansfield, where it is very, very remote. And we're talking about a customer base of maybe 300 or 400. So I think it is something that is really exploring, and we're certainly looking at that.
Okay. Thank you. So, committee members, we're going to wrap up now. Once again, thank both JPS and NWC. We are looking to have our next meeting on the 18th of February, Wednesday, 18th of February, 10 a.m. I'm going to ask, although I'm told the reason it was available was because it's Ash Wednesday. So it would be the following Wednesday, the 25th. Sorry. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask I want that to be the meeting where we finalize our report on what I would call the first phase of Melissa recovery efforts. So I would ask the technical advisor to draft that report. Even though we may have, specific questions for NWC, I think we have in the round sufficient content to draft a report on the phase 1 of the Melissa recovery effort. So when we would meet on the 25th, we would be to do two things: to hear a final, get a final chance to question NWC, but also we would review the report with a view and hopefully approve it so that we can send it to the Parliament in that time. If we're all in favor of that, then and at that time any outstanding minutes, etc., would be approved. So with that, let me thank everybody once again, both members and our guests. I think it's been a productive morning. Thank you very much. Could I have a motion for the termination of the meeting? All in favor?
Motorists, as Minister of Justice, I appeal to you, obey the road code, pay your ticket on time, and only go to court if the ticket is being contested. Close to 80% of matters coming to the parish courts are for traffic breaches. Let's work together to make our roads safe and ease the burden on our courts.
You see what you do now? How you do it? Before I come back home, things are go wrong. Tanks dry up. Frogs gone. Drought. Cows can't get water. My wife gone. Father dead. It's wicked, the wicked make a sister dead. Tell her say how you do it. She can't hear you. Anything you touch, this dead.
Vadney, tell him say it's lie. Is he make rain stop fall? Him is hypocrite. This tell him Vadney. See me want you to dead Vadney. When you open your eyes, don't look at him ever.
She dead?
Of course she dead. Everything is dead for you. Why don't leave her alone? But Ivani, where's your body? It's only a head I can't see.
Who you be?
I'm Balfour. This is Balfour. Your brother?
So she don't know you. Better she know me. Who is me?
Falcon.
All right now. See? She know me. Me is important.
All right, all right.
Where going?
He's not Falcon either. If so, there's two Falcon. Who are you really? What is your name?
Granny surgery. But see ya. Why she leave on the radio burning up me electricity?
Penny, what you doing in here?
Remember, is my room. I just lend you. I come beg you a dash a toothpaste. See me and me toothbrush here, me not lying.
Look over there behind the radio. You don't find it?
Master. Granny, is what kind of love novel this you have in your reading? My word. Ooh. Mm-hmm. I can't believe my eyes. What? Mm-hmm.
Do want these toothpaste you want?
Not again, me love. This novel is enough to clean me teeth, me mouth, me everything.
That is not for you, Vic.
Say what? Say it. Say what?
Watch it.
Each time he touches my cheeks with his gentle hand, a tinkling music enters my ear. His voice, when he speaks to me, whether softly or loudly, it is the same ringing melody to my ear.
Penny, you're sitting on my bed, you know.
Well, it's my bed. And if you don't like it, then pack up your sitting them and come out.
Well, I